Welcome, everybody, to According to Andrew number 18, where we are going to go over the final presidential debate. I read through the transcript, highlighted a couple important things, so hopefully we can speed through this, and this will be like a more condensed version of the presidential debates for you. And I'll give you some commentary and the whole shebang. Um, so, first topic they talked about was coronavirus, which I am so. Ugh, I'm just done with this topic, but we're going to go through it. It was one of the longer sections, unfortunately, but we'll get through it. So Trump started where he noted that there was 2.2 people that were modeled out to die, and that they were off by 85%. Which if anybody's been keeping up with this, they know that's been going on. Let's talk about the vaccines a little bit here and there, um, which I don't trust. But anyway, so that was kind of his little thing, and then Biden responded by saying there's 220,000 dead, and that's not allowable, and how dare people die, kind of thing. Which it's like, people die, get over it. Um, this whole like, oh, one person. Part of the problem has a great example of like, we should get rid of all swimming pools then, because they're completely unnecessary and somebody could drown in them. So we should absolutely not have them at all. And it's like, well, obviously that's not what we want. We like swimming pools, and it's something that we enjoy doing, and we live with the risks. Another great one is Reason Magazine, or Reason's YouTube channel. Remy has a video on people could die, where he makes all these ridiculous claims of like, we need to lower the speed limit to like 4 miles an hour and stuff like that, because people could die, and we can't have people dying. So it's this ridiculous over the top thing that governments do. I get it; it's a political thing. I get it. Whatever. We're gonna try to get through this coronavirus thing as fast as possible because I hate this topic. Um, Basically, they talk about the timelines and how Trump was off on his timelines a lot, uh, and he said his is going to be more accurate. Biden hit him back somewhat well by saying, "You told us that it would be done by Easter." Then, it kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Part of that was part of the whole Democratic strategy of not allowing things to go forward. Right? They kept moving the goalposts so that nobody could actually go back to work and get their lives back to normal. But and Trump kind of abided by that to a certain degree, so it's a little annoying, and I wish he wouldn't have abided by it. But anyway, the he's at least, it's not as shut down as it would be under Biden. So then Trump hits him back, um, that he moved quicker initially, and that they did a terrible job with H1N1. It wasn't as bad of a disease. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure they've been trying to push this whole disease thing to get like a coronavirus type response, and I have no idea why this one bit. The biggest explanation I can think of is that um, it it's a presidential election year, and it was a good masking for an economic collapse, and for the people who wanted it to be an economic collapse to try to get Trump out, it instigated it, kind of thing. But anyway, um, then he calls him xenophobic. Biden calls Trump xenophobic. Um, but then like says uh, he would have still shut down China, and that he wasn't calling him xenophobic for shutting down China. It's a really bad defense. Doesn't make any sense. Then Trump just basically is like, I got it. I recovered. Basically, everybody recovers. This isn't a problem. We need to open things back up. And then uh, and he's like, we need to learn how to live with it, kind of thing. Biden's like, people are learning to die with it. The same stupid trope of people will die thing. It's old, it's annoying, nobody likes it. Um, then they talk about a bunch of crap. And then since I talked about xenophobia in a different context, it wasn't about closing the border to China. Chinese coming to the United States. That's just not true. Um, he thought I shouldn't have closed the borders. That's obvious. Yes. And yeah, the whole Democratic establishment was kind of doing this stuff. Maybe Trump has plausible deniability because he was being pretty quiet at this time, I believe. Mainly because he can't say a sentence, so he's trying not to say as much as possible. No, I'm also, despite Biden not having like a good, like, he is stringing sentences together in this debate. So in that regard, he's doing pretty good. Also, there's not a bunch of like interrupting type things. Like the microphone thing's kind of annoying, but um, there isn't like pages and pages of them just going back and doing like one line quips, which makes the reading a lot quicker, to a certain extent. Uh, so then Welker says you haven't ruled out more shutdowns, and Biden says no, um, that he hasn't, and then he's like, he wants to shut down the nation more. We all know this. He said, like, once I get elected, I'm going to shut it down for 3 more months, which is like, what the fuck are you doing? Um, and then says all the Republican places are the ones doing the worst off. Obviously not true. Trump hits him back. He's like, look at all the shutdowns. His Democratic government, his Democratic governors, Democrats all, they shut down so tight and they're dying. No, we're not going to shut down. All right. I would like things to get back to normal, but I live in a freaking Democratic state, so that's probably not going to happen, which is why I'm trying to get the fuck out of here. Then, oh, as to like how to get things back to normal, he's like, it's a massive country with a massive economy. People are losing their jobs. They're committing suicide. They're depressed, alcohol, drugs at a level nobody's ever seen before. Their abuse, tremendous abuse. We have to open the country. The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself, which is currently what they've done. It's kind of getting back to normal, but like I don't know. The economic downturn was going to happen anyway, so whatever. Um, and then Biden's response is you need to have, if you have a restaurant, you need to have plexiglass dividers so that people can't infect one another, which is just, it's like, what is it? The theater, when you're going through the airport, and they scan you and stuff like that, like they've never caught anybody. Now you can make the argument that like because it's there, it's a deterrence. Okay, that's a reasonable argument. I don't know. There's no real way to measure that or quantify it. But it's all just like not political theater, but it's safety theater, I think is what it's called. Anyway, it's just a theatrical performance to make it seem like you're being safer. And it's like, well, it makes these other people feel good. It's like, I don't give a fuck. Like, it doesn't matter. And so yeah, so they want the political control and like just to break your spirit and will by forcing you to participate in a safety theater where everybody knows it's not saving anyone or helping anyone or whatever, but they can make you do it, and therefore the people that like enforcing it are the people that have no power, that love getting the little power trip of forcing you to do that kind of thing, and some other crap. But I mean, one of the advantages is when you go to restaurants, you were already spread out when you went to a restaurant anyway, but you are a little bit more spread out. You know, if you like your privacy, it is kind of nice. So I guess, you know, got to take the good with the bad. Oh, and then he says, by the way, all you teachers out there, this is Biden, all you teachers out there, not that many of you are going to die, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Come on. So basically another bullshit line of like, oh, well, it's okay if some of them die. It's like, this is a reality of life. We accept when you drive, certain people are going to die, but I'd rather do that than have to walk everywhere. So then what else we got? Oh, and then Trump brings up the ruling in Pennsylvania, and the rulings in Pennsylvania and Michigan, especially Pennsylvania, where he said now it's just been ruled unconstitutional. Obviously, there's some legal stuff that they still have to work through over there. Like basically, it was ruled unconstitutional by that one judge, but then they were able to appeal it, and they also got a stay on the decision. And basically, what the stay says is, before, basically, when he made that decision, his decision should go into effect. But they asked for a stay, where they're like, basically, hey, keep the status quo because this is what we've been doing until we are able to appeal this decision. And then if we lose on appeal, then the thing goes into effect. It's kind of a way to delay the inevitable. I mean, in theory, they could win the appeal, true. But if they didn't get that stay, the way it would work is uh, those measures would be removed, which would probably part of the reason they want to stay is they if the measures are removed and then everything goes back to normal and nothing bad happens, it makes their court case a lot harder. Um, so if they keep everything in place, um, so the way it would work is without the appeal or without the stay is that would go into effect. Everything would go back to normal in Pennsylvania basically, and then once the stay comes in, or once the appeal is decided, then if um, the appeal was denied, uh, everything would just stay as normal, and then if it was granted, then things would go back to how they were before the judge made that ruling. Which, given how the ruling was written, there's no way. But I don't know. Our court systems are very, very corrupt, so you never know. Uh, Going on. Um, oh, then they get into like some stupid tax stuff, I think. Oh, no. Biden basically accuses, uh, Biden does inversion throughout this whole debate. It's insane. I will point it out basically every single time I see it. So he says sell short because we got to move. It's a dangerous problem. So basically, he accuses Trump of what the Democrats and basically a bunch of people in the Senate and House had done, where they found out the news and that the economy was going to crash, and they sold a bunch of stocks because they had inside information, and they sold a bunch of stocks before they before the market took a nosedive. Um, and so that's basically what he's accusing him of doing, which is obviously didn't happen. Maybe it did. I highly doubt it though. Usually they accuse people of doing what they're doing. Um, then he's like, "You're the one that's taking money from Wall Street, but I don't want to. That is because it puts me in a bad position. You know, obviously it's like, oh, I did a favor for you, now you did do a favor for me, now you're in there." And then he's like, "I don't need the money. In fact, I beat Hillary Clinton with a tiny fraction of the money that she was able to get." Um, and we're done with coronavirus, which thank goodness, because fuck that topic. Um, so now we're on to national security, where where we're gonna get into some stupid, weird territory. But and national, so was it foreign policy was taken off the thing, but like somehow national security was on there, and so basically this is like a foreign policy thing, is what it gets into. So, what do the Democrats do? Go back to Russia. Um, so Russia has been involved. Uh, so, let's see here. There's an overwhelming election. Basically, they're like Russia, China, and now Iran are all interfering in the American election, and they're interfering in American sovereignty. Which oh my gosh, it's so laced with irony whenever I hear this. Like they're interfering with American sovereignty thing. It's like, when has America ever given a two shits about anyone else's sovereignty? But like the instant someone meddles in our shit, now it's a problem. Like it's the layers of irony. So that's his thing. And then Joe comes back, or Trump comes back. Joe got $3.5 million from Russia. True, as shown by the emails. And then he also kind of outlines, and this kind of gets into some of the weird stuff that's been happening since Trump took office, and what shows the fact that we might have had a Syracuse moment had Trump not gotten into office. So he says, between the sanctions, nobody tougher than me on Russia. Between the sanctions, between all of what I've done with NATO, you know, I've got NATO countries to put in an extra 130 billion, going to 420 billion each year. That's a guard against Russia. So, it was so weird. So once Trump got into office in like 2016, like everyone started saber rattling. Like part of it was like this whole like, but like there was something else to it. Like everyone was trying to saber rattle super hard against Russia. Like they're trying to bring back the Cold War and get us to. Except this time it seemed like they wanted us to get into a hot war with Russia. And so basically, like we would lose. Uh, like Russia is huge. They have actual national pride. Their tech is pretty good. They do have nukes if they exist. Um, it's not what you want to be fighting. And like Russia was kind of gearing up because they thought Hillary was gonna win. because Hillary wanted to create a no-fly zone in Russia or in Syria and bring Ukraine, which is right on the doorstep of Russia, into NATO, and they wouldn't stand for that. They're like, there's got to be a buffer zone of like the ex-Soviet states are not going to be part of NATO. We're not going to have NATO on our doorstep, which is reasonable. They're like, basically, we're going to have a buffer zone. You know, we're generally just going to stay out of their politics, and they're going to stay out of our. You're going to stay out of their politics as well. Was kind of the deal. Um, it's kind of degenerated over the years, but yeah. So like, we're going to get into this fight with a country that we can't win. China probably joins the side of Russia. I mean, I don't exactly know China-Russian relations, but like, if there's a chance for China to get on the side of Russia and then knock the U.S. off of its pedestal and replace them as the sole superpower, that's what they're going for. Those of you, I mentioned the Syracuse moment earlier. Basically, it was when Athens got into war with Sicily. It's the moment where like a rising power, uh, a, the current power tries to fight the rising power, and in it, basically the idea is like they need to make a move because this power is going to take them over. But it's usually when it's an attempt to like show strength or whatever, but that other power's already overtaken them, and then they lose, and then that rising power is the one that takes over for the current power, and that's when the power dynamic switches. So if America wants to stay number one, the biggest thing they need to do is not fight anybody and not show them that we are potentially a paper tiger, which I think we are. You don't put SJW stuff in your military and have a strong, effective military. Anyway, continuing on. You remember that very well during your term, during the Barack Obama, you took a big part of what should have been. They took a big part of what should have been Ukraine, and you handed it to them. So there was yeah, back in the Obama administration, there was a fight over Ukraine, and Russia ended up with part of it. Also, you know, obviously in the Bush years, there was, I think, Georgia and the Crimea, there was some wars in, or at least territorial disputes. And then he brings up all the emails from Hunter Biden. All the emails are horrible. The emails of the kind of money that you've been raking in. You and your family, Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening. So he nails him on that, and then Biden just straight up lies and says, I have never taken a penny from a foreign source ever in my life. Now, here's the thing. This might not technically be a lie, because he might have had his kids take the money, and then his kids give him that money. So technically, it didn't directly come from a foreign source. But that's like lie by omission kind of, like, it's dishonest, at the very least. And then he gets into like tax returns. He's like, I've released all my tax returns. Like, who gives a shit? And then Trump just goes back to like, he's like, I got audits on all my accounts, which is, like, it's been 4 years, man. And Biden calls him out. It's like, dude, it's been like 4 years. Like, you tell me they're still auditing your accounts? Like, how many accounts do you got? And then he addresses the 750 where he's like, he prepaid his taxes, which, yeah, the year where he only paid $750 in taxes that they brought up, it was like a year he prepaid his taxes. And so that was like something he missed. There was a filing fee, is what he says later. Trump again. I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do. I don't make money from Russia. You made $3.5 million, Joe. Hitting him again on that same thing. And then Welker asks, he asked, did he tell you could release him? He asked him, Trump, about his tax returns, which, that's like the one annoying thing. Like, like, Trump, and obviously this is how it was going to be, but like, the moderator never once brings up the emails. Like, Trump hammers him all the time on these emails, and the moderator never once brings it up. We knew this was going to happen, but, you know, I should comment that it did happen. So he basically is like, what's up with you not releasing your tax returns? And then Trump hits a pretty good point where he says, I got treated worse than the Tea Party got treated. A lot of people in there deep down in the IRS, they treat me horribly. We made a deal. It was settled until I decided to run for president. I got treated badly by the IRS. They're very unfair. We had a deal all done. So basically, he's just addressing the fact that the IRS under Barack Obama, I don't know if it happened to others, but like for sure under Barack Obama, was weaponized to be used against political opponents to try to um, bury them in legal fees and stuff. Like he would specifically sick the IRS on um, various charities and corporate interests that didn't align with his views, and you know how the government is in the IRS. Like if they want to find something, they'll find something. Um, and so that was used, and apparently, like especially with charities like 501(c)s and stuff like that, there's so many rules and laws and stuff like that. If the government wanted to, they could find you in violation of basically something within those rules because they're so convoluted and contradictory in how they operate. Um, and so you never prosecute the people that you like, and you always prosecute the people that you don't like. Um, so anyway, they jibber jabber about some stuff, and then Trump gets into the witch hunt that was on him. Um, says I was put through a witch hunt, a phony witch hunt for 3 years. It started even before I got elected. They spied on my campaign. No president should ever have to go through what I went through. Just let me say this: Mueller and the 18 angry Democrats, the FBI agents all over the place, spent 48 million. They went through everything I had, including my tax returns, and they found absolutely no collusion and nothing wrong. 48 million. I guarantee you, if I spent 1 million on Joe, I could find plenty wrong, because the kind of things that you've done, and the kind of monies that your family has taken. I mean, your brother made money in Iraq, millions of dollars. You and your brother made a fortune, and it's all through you, Joe. And they say you got some of it, and you have to live, and you do live very well. You have houses all over the place. You live very well. And then the moderator says, Vice President Biden, there have been questions about your work with your son in China and for Ukraine energy companies when you were vice president. In retrospect, were any of these relationships inappropriate or unethical? Oh, I guess I was wrong. So there is one question. I think this is it, though, and I don't think they press him anymore, but we'll go through and we'll see. So Biden just says, no, there's nothing unethical. Obviously lie. And then every single solitary person, when he was going through his job, impeachment, testifying under oath, who worked for him, said, I did my job impeccably. So basically, he's like, yeah, when people who had an interest in staying on my good side went and had testified, they lied for me because this is how the entire system works. And we've seen from, like not the WikiLeaks, but like the NSA and stuff like that, like, and Brennan and who's the CIA director, like, if you lie for the right people, you're never held accountable. Like, um, who was it? Roger Stone was convicted on misremembering a date and therefore considered to be lying to the FBI. Uh, the NSA director straight up lied to Congress, which is illegal, which technically breaks the First Amendment, but whatever. Um, about the so lying to Congress uh, about the fact that they weren't spying. Did he ever face accountability? Of course not, because he lied about the right thing. You know, so it's like if you say a lie and it lines up with the Democratic agenda or keeping the status quo and establishment in their places and goes against Trump, you will never be held accountable. So what they said under oath doesn't mean anything. Um, the guy who got in trouble in Ukraine was this guy trying to bribe Ukrainian government to say something negative about me, which they do not do. So basically, another lie. He was trying to find out what was going on with the deals in Ukraine, and there's a video clip of Biden because they can't help but bragging about the fact that he got this prosecutor fired from his job because they were going to be investigating Burisma and the dealings with his thing. And he's like, I basically said this deal isn't going to go through. I think it was like an arms deal, basically the same thing they accused Trump of doing, or some other relief package. I'm not going to give you this money, Ukraine, unless you get rid of this guy. And they did, and voila, everything was honky dory. And so Trump was basically like, hey, what happened with that? We should look into that again. And then they tried to accuse him of doing the same thing that they did, which is like, oh, they're obviously holding up the thing, so they do this whatever, and the timelines don't line up. So, but Democrats gonna lie. What's new? Then Trump goes on to hit him again. I hear they paid talking about Hunter Biden. I hear they paid him 183,000 a month. Listen to that, 183, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment, and he had no energy experience. That's 100% dishonest. And then Biden just again lies, where he says no basis for that. Everyone investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong in Ukraine. Which again, there hasn't been extensive investigation, and the investigations that have been done or testimonies or whatever have been set up to try to, deflect and, it's like the Brian Stelter or whatever had this thing where he's like talking about the emails and he's just like, oh well, this isn't information I agree with, so it's obviously disinformation kind of thing. It is so just dismissive of ever anything that could potentially shatter his worldview. Anyway, moving on. So the next question that Welker asks, how can voters know that you don't have any foreign conflicts of interest? And this is to Trump for some reason. And basically he had a bank account in China that for foreign business dealings, and he had opened in 2013 and closed in 2015. That's about the extent of it. And he says, so I closed it before I ran for president, let alone became president. Big difference. He's the vice president of the United States, and his son, his brother, and his other brother are getting rich. They are in a vacuum. They're like a vacuum cleaner. And then Welker tries to move on. Got to protect Biden because that's what the establishment does. What I made in China. Oh, and then so then they ask, if you're president, would you make China pay? And please be specific what that would be. What I make China do is play by international rules, not like he has done. So again, he's just like, I would, which is just nonsense. Like, they were never held account ever, and Trump slams him on this stuff all the time. So we'll get to that. But like, they never played under international rules until Trump got in, and we all know this. And then he says some absolutely insane thing, like stuff that is so boneheadly stupid in foreign relations things. But we are making sure that in order to do business in China, you have to give all your intellectual property. I'm not really sure what he meant by that. You have to have a partner in China. It is a 51%. We would not do that at all. Number one. So basically he's saying if you're doing business dealings in China, you have to give up your intellectual property. That's the Chinese rules. And he's like, we're not going to do that anymore, which I'm pretty sure, yeah. Trump's been doing more to protect intellectual property and stuff like that than any administration of the last 20 years. So, yeah, it's kind of a non-thing. But anyway, if he actually does it, cool, great. I don't believe him, though, because he's in China's pocket. And then this is just... Okay. I was watching this, like, What If channel the other day, and it was really cool. And I didn't realize how bad the U.S.-China war would go. But basically he's like, all right, if the U.S. and China go to war, the U.S. has to kill 4 soldiers for every one of ours that we lose. Now, they're a near-peer military country, right? So, can we kill 4 to 1? Well, let's put it this way. The best ratio killing off outside of, like, native conflicts, which don't count because it's not a near-peer thing. Basically, like, colonial warfare didn't count because, we have Maxim machine guns and they have, like, short swords and spears. Like, it's not a near-peer fight. So the closest one is World War II on the Eastern Front, where for every one German that died, they killed 3 Russians. That is still a quarter less than that's one person, and that is a massive difference. The difference between killing 1 to 3 versus 1 to 4 is massive. Like it's a 25% gain, right? There's no way. So this is what he says. When I meet with Xi, and when I was still vice president, he said we're setting up air identification zones in the South China Sea. You can't fly through them. I said we're going to fly through them. We flew B-52 and B-1 bombers through it. We're not going to pay attention. They have to play by the rules. And what's he doing? This is trying to set up a flashpoint moment where like something's got to give, right? It's dumb. It's like, why are we fighting them on this front? Like, it doesn't matter. So, like, take your loss kind of thing. And part of it is, if we're the sole superpower number one in charge, like, you can't take this stuff lying down to a certain extent. But like, they would beat us, guys. it's like, what are you trying to do to get into war with China? Like, what? I just thought that was insane. So anyway, and then he's like sad that we're only 25% of the world economy, which during World War II we were like 50% of the world economy. But again, there's more industrialized nations now, so like 25% for our overall population, not bad. But obviously, like there's a lot of issues that make that 25% not really what it needs to be. Like it's not distributed properly, and like a lot of the industry that is required to have a actual economy and not just like a slave master type economy that we basically have doesn't exist. Anyway, so and then he's like basically to China, this is Biden still. You play by them, and you're going to pay the price for not playing by them economically. That's what I will run on, and that's what I did in upholding steel tariffs and a range of other things that we things when we were president and vice president. Which again, do you not think we have a fucking memory? Like, Trump put in the steel tariffs. Hello, what? And put in basically all the like not all the tariffs, but like most of the tariffs we have now, like that were increased and stuff like that was all under Trump. Like you did nothing on that front. And then Trump just sticks them with your son walked away with with $1.5 billion. It's $1 billion more than I initially said. That is crazy. After spending 10 minutes in office and being on Air Force, I don't know, number one. He says something weird. Anyway, there's a very strong email talking about your family wanting to make $10 million a year for introductions. Biden says not true. We can read emails, Joe. What specifically are you doing to make China pay? Is asked Trump. First off, China is paying. They're paying billions of dollars. I just gave 28 billion to the farmers. Basically, China pays for 28 billion, and you know what they did to pay it, Joe? They devalued their currency. They also paid up. And you know who got that money? Our farmers, our great farmers, because they would target it. You never charged them anything. Also, I charged them 25% to dump steel because they were killing our steel industry. We were going to have a steel, and they were not going to have a steel, and now we were going to have a steel industry. Sometimes the way Trump talks is weird. So yeah, so he put a 25% tariff on there. Like, to not have a steel industry is a massive security problem. Like, if you can't produce the steel, like World War II, in a certain extent, was won by the fact that America was able to outproduce like the rest of the world, basically. And in our current situation, like, we can't outproduce China. So like, even ignoring the 1 to 4 ratio of like humans and stuff like that, if we got into a war with them, like, they would be able to outproduce our material by like an insane margin. And then, like, on top of that, they would just need some submarines to make sure that our supply lines are disrupted, because I'm assuming we're going over there because they don't really have the Navy to project over to here. It'd be a weird war. So it's like, you need to have like a heavy industry. Like if it disappears, it doesn't come back the next day. That's a lot of expensive capital equipment that you sold off or moved somewhere. And like the people that knew what they were doing, like that's knowledge that it's gonna get lost. So keeping those kind of industries around is very important. And then Biden just says the fucking most non-political thing ever. Where he's like, it's not about his family or my family. It's about your family, and your family's hurting badly. And he just says platitudes about fucking nothing. Um, and Trump hits him back. Just a typical political statement. Let's get off this China thing. And then he looks the family around the table. Everything just typical politician when I see it. Yeah, hitting the head on the nail. And then points it out again. Let's get off the topic of China. Let's talk about sitting around the table. Come on, Joe. You can do better. Uh, and then Welker asks about North Korea. So North Korea recently rolled out its biggest ever intercontinental ballistic missile and continues to develop its nuclear arsenal. Do you see this as a betrayal of the relationship to Trump? And Trump doesn't really say anything here, in all honesty. It's one of his weaker responses. Um, but he basically finishes, we don't want war, and I have a good relationship. And even with this rolling out, like, overall things on the Korean Peninsula have been developing well. So, yeah, it's fine by me. Biden says, uh, he'd say, why are you moving your missile defenses up close? Why are you moving more forces? Why are you continuing to do military maneuvers with South Korea? I said because North Korea is a problem, and we're going to continue to do that so we can control them. Basically, again, just doing things that are going to escalate the issue. Like, does he not understand? Well, obviously, he's part of the cabal that wants war with fucking everybody, like the neocons. So I get it, but it's so dumb. It's like they're not a threat, guys, and it's like super risky to do this. And Trump will point this out later. Um, and so you want to do something about it, step up, and if not, it's going to continue. So like this is the kind of mentality that has made it negotiations get absolutely nowhere on the continent for literally ever. Um, Around the peninsula. And then Welker points out, you said you wouldn't meet with Kim Jong Un without precautions or preconditions. What are those conditions? And the conditions that he would agree to, he would draw down. This is Biden. Down his nuclear capacity. To get there, the Korean Peninsula should be a nuclear-free zone, which is like, well, did you see what you did to Gaddafi? Why would I ever do that? Like, it's just so, it's a position that they know they can never accept, and therefore they can continue to use North Korea as a way to saber rattle and potentially start a war with Korea, or not Korea, China. But it's like you're like sacrificing everyone in soul if you do that. And South Korea doesn't want a war with North Korea. They don't give a shit anymore, as far as I can tell. Um, and then Trump points out they tried to meet with him. He wouldn't do it. He didn't like Obama. He didn't like him. He wouldn't do it. This is Trump talking about Kim Jong Un. Uh, and then Biden just makes this ridiculous point about World War II. He's like, we had a good relationship with Hitler before he invaded Europe, and it's like this. It's like just trying to compare everyone to Hitler. It's overdone and annoying, and nobody likes it. Um, and that kind of wraps that up. Oh, I thought he hit him on. Basically, I thought he hit him on the fact that he didn't actually have a plan. But anyway, um, yeah. So things are moving okay over there, and North Korea and South Korea are talking. That's what actually matters because yeah. So we're on to the economy. Uh, so what would you do if people have their health insurance taken away? So somehow on the economy we end up on health insurance right away. But whatever. Um, so basically Trump's like I terminated the individual mandate. Then he talks about pre-existing conditions will have to stay, which just isn't. And it's a political move, and it sounds nice. It can't possibly exist, because then people don't get insurance until they get sick, then they get the insurance, and then they cure themselves, and then they stop getting the insurance again. It doesn't work. um, and then he says like the most Trumpian thing ever. He's like, I'd like to terminate Obamacare and come up with a brand new, beautiful healthcare system. The big, beautiful, classic Trump line. Um, and he ends with, "We have done an incredible job with healthcare, and we're going to do even better," which is like, you haven't. Sorry, Trump. That is, this is one of your weaker spots. But anyway, it is what it is. Uh, so then he's like, we're gonna. So then, question goes to Biden, and Biden says, "What I want to do is Obamacare with a public option, become Biden care." Uh, which everyone knows, like, public option means it's going to provide prices that aren't markedly logical, which will force all the other uh, private options out of business, and therefore there will only be one option. This is how it works. Uh, so then he says, thirdly, the idea that I want to eliminate private insurance. The reason why I have had such a fight with 20 candidates for the nominee, I will support private insurance. And it's like, well, the very act of adding a public option makes that not true. Um, and the only reason like the public option kind of works, like, because it exists now, it's like because it's not available to everybody. It's limited to such a small percentage of the population that the rest of the population is basically able to subsidize it, and uh, like it doesn't really function anyway. Like a lot of people don't get taken on and stuff like that. There's a lot of issues with it. Anyway, the moderator says, "What do you say to people who have concerns that your health care plan, which included a government insurance option, takes the country one step closer to a healthcare system which is entirely run by government?" So actually pushes back on him, which is nice. Uh, what he's saying is ridiculous. Okay, so again, it's just like, instead of coming up with an actual defense, you just say some platitude, right? And it's like, it's ridiculous. All right, moving on. It's like saying, that we're the idea that the fact that there's a public option that people can choose that makes it a socialist plan, which is like, nobody's saying that, but it's the argument that I said. Like, once you put a public option in there, it's going to be the cheaper option and then undercut any private option, and those private options that actually have to turn a profit are then going to go out of business, and then there will be only one option. This is how it works. Um, and then Trump is hit him on this basically like this from now on, where he's like, "Excuse me, he was there for 47 years, he didn't do it," uh, and now it's not like it was 25 years ago. He was there and 3/4 years ago. I was just a little while ago, right? Less than 4 years ago, he didn't do anything. He wants to socialize medicine, and it's not what he wants; it's what his vice president wants. Um, and then he gets into fracking, and he's like, how he claims we're not gonna have he claimed that we're not gonna have fracking, we're gonna stop fracking, and then like when he goes to Pennsylvania, he says, oh, we're gonna have fracking, and that'll come up later on in the debate. So he hammered on that. Then they go back and forth on some stuff that didn't matter. And then he tried to hurt Social Security years ago. Go back and look at the records. He tried to hurt Social Security. Oh yeah, they go back and forth on Social Security crap, which is like, this is another one where it's like a third, like you can't, the fifth column or whatever the heck they call it, you can't talk about this stuff and not back Social Security. But like, Social Security is a dead program. It's got to go. It can't. It's literally unsustainable. Like, we have what, 20 trillion in debt, in total debt, but we have like 100 trillion in unpaid liabilities, and most of it comes from Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. That shit's got to go. And I mean, we're at the point where it's like the Poomers are the ones that are supposed to get it, and they already fucking like mortgaged everything and sold. Like, I don't even think they deserve it. Fuck them. It's like they already took the best of everything, mortgaged it so they could have a bunch while they left scraps for their kids, kind of thing. And it's like, and now they want the Social Security? No, get out of here. You already had the best of literally everything. like Social Security. Now is the time to cut Social Security because everyone knows in my generation and Gen X and Gen Z. I'm millennial, by the way. Uh, like we're not getting that shit. So it's like, okay, well, let's just tear off the band-aid now with the generation that is the most capable of handling the fact that they aren't going to get their $200 check every month or whatever the heck it is. Like it's everyone knew this was funk. Um, maybe the not the baby boomers, but the greatest generation, the World War II generation, actually deserved it. Maybe you could make that argument. Um, but yeah, like the boomers, come on, they already had the best of everything. Um, so anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So then we get into the question. Washington has been fighting over a relief bill. Um, and why haven't you gotten it through? And basically, Trump's like, Nancy Pelosi won't negotiate, which, as far as I can tell, is true. And he's like, I do. It's one of the reasons Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to approve anything. Um, we've already approved a couple plans, but now they don't want to approve anything. And then Biden later on brings up, a little bit later, brings up the HEROES Act. And then Trump, he's like, that bill was passed in the House and was a bailout for badly run, high crime Democratic, all run by Democrats, cities and states, which is absolutely true. So good job hitting them there. And then it was also a way to get a lot of money from our people's pockets to people who come in the country illegally. Yeah, so it's just, and he's like, it'd be nice to be a bleeding heart, but reality says no. um, and then Biden says this fucking weird thing. Um, where he's like, he's running as a proud American. I want to be an American. Like everyone's an American. You should vote for me because America. And then he says this, uh, like, is like he's like against balanced budgeting. He's like the founders were smart. They allowed the federal government to deficit spend to compensate for the United States of America. Which, what does that even mean? Like they didn't allow deficits. Well, I technically they did, but like it was a major contentious issue. Like they weren't supposed to deficit spend. Deficit was considered bad. There was a huge argument over like a central bank. Like uh, Jackson actually got us out of our deficit and made it so that the government had zero debt and zero and actually had like a surplus for the first time ever. It was amazing. Like Jackson, great guy. Um, so yeah, it's just I don't know what he's talking about here. Deficit spending is bad. Don't do it. It's like in theory it's necessary in war, blah blah blah, but like that just probably shows that you shouldn't be fighting wars. And if you couldn't deficit spend for wars, you probably limit their scale and scope and violence. So anyway, uh, then they get into the minimum wage. Um, And Biden's like, we should increase the minimum wage, and Trump's like, it should depend on the states because, in New York, $15 an hour probably makes sense. It's a wicked expensive place to live. But in Alabama, like, the cost of living isn't nearly that high. Uh, so that kind of wraps that up. And then they get into immigration, and they basically, I don't know, they set this whole thing on, so like, will families ever be reunited? Like, you tear families apart at the border, and what are they ever going to do? Which it's like, so Trump was like, children are brought in by coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels. They're brought here, and it's easy to use them to get into the country. We have a stronger border, and we've heard of it. So basically, this isn't, like, this whole tearing, it's like, we have no way of knowing that the adults with these kids are their parents. They could have just be sex traffickers and slavers, basically, that stole some kids and are trying to bring them across the border and trying to use the idea that they're their parents as like a sympathy thing. So like you have to remove them from those people because until they can be confirmed that they're there, like you can't do it. And then apparently the 400 brand new miles of wall have been built. But he wants to still bring people across legally. I'm annoyed by that, but Trump's a civnat, so fine. And then Welker, the moderator, kind of keeps pressing him on this whole idea of like, do you want to reunite kids? And Trump kind of dodges initially, and then does actually answer. He's like, yeah, we're working on it, but it's hard to make sure that they're actually the freaking parents. Um, and to make sure that like coyotes and cartels and gangs aren't gonna get in the way. And then Biden just like these 500 kids came with their parents. And it's like, no, they didn't. Most of the time, no. And there's no way to know. Like, it's just like this stupid like assuming the best in people kind of thing, where it's just like, oh well, obviously they came with their parents, so it's fine. Ugh. Anyway, um, so then then Trump hits him on we changed the policy. Basically, the kids in cages thing existed under the Obama Biden presidency, and nobody cared. And now it's all of a sudden a problem when when Trump does it. So Trump keeps going. He's like, "Who built the cages? Who built the cages?" Joe kind of keeps pressing him on it, and then they move on. Um, and then let me ask you about your immigration. Vice President Obama administration did not did fail to deliver on immigration reform, which had been the key promise during that administration. It also presided over record deportations as well as family detentions at the border after changing course. So why should voters trust you with immigration? Actually, a question. And then he's like, basically, well, in the first 100 days, I'm going to secure a bunch of votes by making a bunch of people who shouldn't be here illegally. 11 million is his number. Who are undocumented people into citizens. It's like, no. And then uh, he's going to turn all the Dreamers and DACA kids into citizens too, or be legally certified again. Which I don't know if that necessarily means citizenship or he's just going to renew the program. I don't know. So no, this is obviously not what the people want. I mean, I guess if you are in that group, it's something that you want, but it's like, go home. Um, and then he's like, you had 8 years to do what he said he's going to do, and I've changed without having to be specific. We got rid of catch and release and got rid of a lot of horrible things that they put into place that they live with. But he had 8 years to do it. As vice president, he did nothing. And then Biden says this obviously false thing where it's like they were with catch and release, which is like you catch them and they're like, come back for a court date later, and they're like, yeah, sure, totally, and then they never do. So he's like, they were released, and guess what? They showed up at the hearing. And he's like, no, and Trump hits him on this. He's like, they never show up. Uh, it it's so important. It shows that he has no understanding of immigration of the laws. Catch and release is a disaster. A murderer would come in, a rapist would come in, a very bad person would come in. We would take their name, we would have to release them into our country, and they would say they'd come back. Less than 1% of them come back, which I'm even surprised 1% come back. Like, why would you? um, we have to send ICE and Border Patrol out to find them, and we'd say, come back in 2 years, 3 years, we're going to give you a court case. You said Perry Mason, we're going to give you a court case. When you say they come back, they don't come back, Joe. They never come back. Only I hate to say this, but only those with the lowest IQ, they might come back. Oh, dude, that's actually pretty funny. I missed that part when I read it first. So they kind of go back and forth. But, like, yeah, like, obviously, why would you come back? Um, so then they get into race in America and they just like load the entire thing. And of course they don't talk about the fact that there's been constant burning down of cities and riots, which is just. But this was always going to happen anyway. Part of the experience is something called the talk. It happens regardless of class and income. Parents who feel that they have no choice but prepare their children for the chance that they could be targeted, including by the police, for no reason other than the color of their skin. Mr. President, in the next 2 minutes, would you directly to these families, do you understand the parents and their fears? 50% of the crimes in the country are committed by 6% of the population, which is, or maybe it's even less than 6%. It's basically black males from the ages of like 15 to 25 or 30, something like that. It's like basically most of the crime. So it's like I can't believe it's like if you're in the group that doesn't like do this stuff, then don't do it, or then it's fine. Like this isn't actually a thing. And like I grew up I went to high school with like people, and this wasn't an issue that like any of them had. Like if some of them got in trouble with the law, then they got in trouble with the law. Actually, there was one guy that kind of ended up having this happen to him, and the big difference was he was a kid. He's like a city, uh, urban black kid who came to like our school, and we were basically like all suburban kids, and like of like uh, the blacks and the Hispanics that were there, like there were suburban blacks, and there was obviously a cultural difference there because like he would go and get in trouble and stuff like that in a way that the other ones never seemed to. Um, at least not that I was aware of. I wasn't super close friends with like any of them, but um, enough to like I was on the football team and stuff. Like if you're getting in trouble legally, you're gonna have issues on the football field, kind of thing, and like none of that stuff came up, so it wasn't it, it like like yeah, class obviously has a distinction in some of this stuff. Like I know the whole like race is an important factor and all that, and that's true to a certain degree, but like class definitely also plays a factor in your cultural upbringing and stuff like that. And it is one of the pillars of nationality. So, if you're culturally more, if you're in like a suburban culture where it's, uh, you're basically white middle class, uh, growing up kind of thing, and things are pretty normal. It's not like high crime type stuff. Like you're gonna live a more normal life. Um, anyway, Biden yammers on some crap and says the matter of fact is institutional racism is in America, which it's not. Um. Anyway, so then Trump is like, he's been governing for 47 years. He hasn't done shit. Um. And in 1994, he ruined black communities with the crime bill. Now and called them super predators, which I get the idea that like not all black, but like again, it's we want law and order. Like to act like there might be aspects of I haven't read through the 1994 crime bill, and there might be aspects of it that need to be revised, and like mandatory minimums and some other stuff, and petty crime changes might need to be revived, but at the same time, like the broken window theory, in which is basically enforcing the law, but the actual thing is like if you find a broken, like you enforce every little law on the book to make sure that people stay in orderly and customary thing, because the people know that the law will actually be enforced and it's not just an arbitrary thing. Whereas like if you don't enforce every law, then it's like, okay, well, what laws can I break and what laws can't I break? And you have much more people that are going to be trying to break the law and kind of test the boundaries of the system. Um, so yeah, so the 1994 crime bill didn't help the black community. It's not necessarily good thing for them. But at the same time, they like that community does commit a lot of crime, like insane amount, and the worst and most of it's against other black people. So it's they're causing kind of like the demise of their own community to a certain degree, because the ones that aren't committing these crimes are just probably fed up with it. I don't exactly know the answer to some of this stuff, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. So we can focus. So Trump basically says he's the best president for black people since Abraham Lincoln. And then he brings up the fact that he gave a bunch of money to some black colleges, and basically they under the Obama administration they had to come back for funding every year, and he gave them a 10-year long-term funding to help them make it so that they could have long-term goals and plan accordingly and stuff like that, and so they weren't so tied to making sure they had money every year, and they could actually have a long-term goal and outlook on stuff, which is nice. Federal spending always kind of a question mark, but it's something. He says the only bad part is that I might never see you again. So that's a good thing. Money doesn't cure all ails is part of the problem there, but if they're functional colleges, and I'm sure he did some kind of vetting process, so I'm not too worried about it. Besides the fact that we're spending money we don't have, but that's kind of that's government. So, um, Biden says he's trying to spend 20 billion to get rid of mandatory minimums, drug courts, get jail with drug problems, get into rehabilitation, blah blah blah. And he's like, okay, that's nice and all, but you had a chance to do this forever and you never did. Um, and then then Trump says, Joe, I ran because of you. I ran because of Barack Obama because you did a poor job. If I said you did a good job, I would have never run. I would have never run. I ran because of you. I'm looking at you now. You're a politician. I ran because of you. So that's just kind of a fun dig he got. And we're talking about stuff. And then Trump somehow gets the laptop brought up during this whole thing. Um, and Biden just passes it off as Russia disinformation. And so he's like, you mean this laptop is now Russia, Russia, Russia hoax? Uh, you've got to be kidding me. Here we go again with Russia. Um, so obviously all that's insane. And then I think we move to something else. Yeah, Black Lives Matter as a symbol of hate, which they basically are. Um, and then this is just like such a freaking setup of a question. Of course, we never talk about like the massive amount of issues that Black Lives Matter is causing right now. Um, Chanting white power to millions of supporters. You've said black professional athletes exercising their First Amendment rights should be fired, which is like you're under my. That's like saying I can say anything I want at work, and everybody knows that's not true. Um, you like part of being a professional athlete is it's like or at least in the football is like it's tied in with like the patriotism of America. It's part of our rah Americanism thing. Disrespecting the flag is a big no. uh, you stand, you hold over your heart. It's a big thing. Anyway, I'll have to understand. Heard Black Lives Matter. You're chanting pigs in a blanket, talking about police, and then he says he's the least racist person, whatever. This debate really fizzles out towards the end. Uh, And then Trump's like, I got prison reform done. I got new opportunity zones. Black people's lives are looking up because of me. Got more of them employed, all that good stuff. Then Biden says, like, he pours fuel on every single uh, race fire in existence, which is not true. Like, the whole victim narrative that the Democrats push is what actually instigates all these fires, kind of thing. Like, you're entitled to shit. And this is like, no, you're not. Um, he banned Muslims, which again is just total misrepresentation of what was going on there. Uh, he moved around and made everything worse across the board. Might as well be talking about Obama here. He's saying then uh, he's talking about the Proud Boys. Last time they were on here on stage, he said I told them to stand down and stand ready. Come on, this guy's dog whistle as big as a foghorn, which is just and then of course like throughout all that we're never gonna bring up the fact that half the cities across the country are on fire because of uh you know not people who are white. Well, I don't know. There are a lot of dumb white liberals that are burning shit down, but um yeah. And then Trump, so they kind of go back and forth, and then Trump's like, now you've done nothing other than the crime bill, which is tens of thousands of black men, mostly in jail, and you know what? They remember it because uh, it you ah they remember it because you look at what's happening to the voting right now, and you remember that they treated them very very badly. Just look at what's happening, uh, and then the moderator asked, the crime bill that you supported in the 80s and 90s contributed to the incarceration of tens of thousands of young black men who had small amounts of drugs on their possession. These are sons, their brothers, their fathers, their uncles, whose family are still to this day, and some of them suffering the consequences. So speak to the families. Why should they vote for you? Um, he said it's a mistake. I've been trying to change that ever since. Again, you had plenty of time. You didn't. And then partially the portion on cocaine. Only reason he probably cares is because his son's on crack. Um, why didn't you get it done? and then they kind of go back and forth about some crap. They go into climate change for the last little thing, which uh, if climate change was supposed to kill us 40 years ago, so the fact that it hasn't, not too worried about it. Um, but they talk about climate change and growth in jobs, and Trump says something about planting a bunch of trees, and uh, they lowered carbon emissions. I'm assuming that's by happy accident. And then he's like, basically, we pulled out of the Paris Accords because it was basically a trap to siphon more jobs from America into China and Russia and some of these other competing countries, where would have to conform to standards that are not possible, and therefore they would have moved those factories to places where you could just pollute like no other. Um, and America is like the cleanest world or country in the world. Like we do a good job. So anyway, and then of course Biden's climate change, climate warming, global warming is an existential threat to humanity. No, it's not. It's a fucking made up thing in the Democratic whatever. Well, I don't know if it's made up by Democrats, but it's definitely used by them. And then this gets to the heart of it. We have a moral obligation to deal with this. Like this is like one of their because the um, you know, when you worship the state kind of thing, like this, it becomes your religion. And so like this is like their big religious war, right? This is their crusade. Um, so anyway, so they say they're going to spend a bunch of money to get 50,000 charging stations throughout all the highways on to get electric cars up and going. Uh, and then they want to take 4 million homes and like retrofit them, which will just you could maybe make the argument that the charging stations isn't going to backfire or whatever, but like the home thing is going to tank the economy. And Trump gets into this. Um, so basically, he's like his plan's going to cost $100 trillion. It's going to take $6,500 away from each family based on his plan. And do you know who developed that plan? AOC. Um, I didn't say that in order, but uh, and then they want to knock down buildings and build new ones with little tiny windows and many other things, which I just found kind of funny. Um, in fact, earlier he says it'd be better if they had no windows at all, just everybody in their little coffin boxes. Um, and then Biden's like, they know where their future lies. Their future lies in us being able to breathe. It's like we can breathe better in this city, in America, more than anywhere else, outside of like major, all the ironically Democrat-run major cities, or they have major smog issues because there's way too many freaking people there. Um, and then he says like, there's good, growing jobs that pay $40 to $50 an hour. 40 to $50 an or 45 to $50 an hour. 45 to $50 an hour is insane. I worked as an engineer, got paid a good wage, which was like 70K or whatever, and that's $35 an hour. You're talking about like 100K plus job at that point. Let me just do the math real quick. Times wait, something's wrong. Oh, uh, 50 times 40. It's 52 weeks in a year. There we go. Yeah, it's 100. It's $100,000 a year at the $40,000 level. If you do the $50,000 level, or no, that wasn't $50,000. So yeah, that's just way too much money. Like, you know who could afford that kind of stuff? Oil companies, because they make a boatload of money, and also they run a lot on debt. That's mainly why they can afford that. Um, So anyway, Trump comes back with saying we're energy independent for the first time in the year, and like America's this amazing country which is like so big and has so many freaking resources. We could literally lock down the borders and only have like an internal economy of our entire thing, and go like full Japan, um, where they like isolated themselves for like 200 years, and we would be fine. It's it's kind of crazy that we can do that. Um, And then Trump's like, I know more about wind than you. It's extremely expensive. It kills all the birds, and it's intermittent. So all that's true. Um, And then a little bit more talking, and he's like, but if you want to kill the economy, get rid of oil industry, what about fracking? So they go back and forth, and then he finally gets him to admit that he wants to ban fracking. I do rule a ban on fracking because the answer is we need other industries to transition to get ultimately to complete zero emissions by 2025. 2025. That'd be 1 year after his presidency. To get there, you'd basically have to ban fracking immediately. And rework, like, it would just crash the economy. There's no freaking way. Um, I will do the fracking over time and make sure that we capture the emissions from fracking and stuff, and basically just make it so that you can't make any money at it. So basically, Trump's like, so he's against fracking. He said it. Um, and then they get into there's people that live near factories that are worried that they're getting sick because you've reduced regulations, which we have so many regulations. I guarantee you they did not reduce enough regulations to make it so that they could just start dumping chemicals in the water again. Um, and so Trump doesn't really say much on this, mainly because he's like, I don't have the stats for it. And he says, we saved the oil industry, and now it's very vibrant. Everyone has very inexpensive gasoline, which the gas is cheap right now, relative. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, it doesn't really say much. And then he wants to stop giving federal subsidies to gas and stuff like that. And um, Biden wants to stop giving federal subsidies to gas, which again is going to be something that's going to cause a problem in the economy, and potentially jeopardize the energy independence, especially in a time right now where they can't make any money on that stuff because the prices tanked. I don't know if they went back up or not, but um, because basically you remember that Texas, you remember that Pennsylvania, Oklahoma. Um, yeah, basically Trump's like, oh, he wants to destroy the industry, so remember that all those states that require that. And then the final question is, what do you want to say to the American people who didn't vote for you? And Trump's like, we'll be successful, basically. And Biden says something about hope over fear, basically. Uh, both both answers are kind of meh. Anyway, that's the whole thing. That took a while. Um, but yeah, that was the whole debate. And so thanks for listening. Hopefully you found something interesting here, or maybe not. But uh, anyway, if you have anything you want to say about it, comment below, and then like and subscribe. I would highly appreciate it. Anyway, have a good rest of the day, and yeah.